Chapter 15. Lines are drawn. Sunlight in New York is never gentle. It doesn't crawl into a room, it strikes, reflecting off the glass towers of Midtown like 1,000 blades. But this morning, as I watched the light dance across Maya's sleeping form, the sharpness of the world outside felt distant. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't reach for my phone the moment I opened my eyes. I didn't check the Nikkei or the pre-market futures. I stayed perfectly still, watching the slow, rhythmic rise and fall of her shoulders. Last night had changed everything. The confession, those 3 words I had spent a decade convincing myself I would never say, still hung in the air, heavy and permanent. I had given her her freedom, and in return, she had given me her heart. It was the most lopsided trade I'd ever made, and yet I felt like I had finally won the only deal that mattered. But as I looked at the dark silk of her hair spilled across my pillow, the CEO in me began to wake up. And the CEO knew that we were in the center of a hurricane. Vane Global was wounded, but not dead. Caleb Thorne was a cornered rat, and cornered rats were the ones who bit the hardest. And my board of directors. They were currently reading the morning headlines, which I knew without looking would be a disaster. I slipped out of bed, the cool air of the penthouse hitting my bare skin. I moved to the window, looking out at the city I claimed to own. It looked different today. It looked like a battlefield where I finally had something to protect other than a bottom line. "You're already thinking about the board," a soft, sleepy voice said from the bed. I turned. Maya was propped up on her elbows, the sheet pulled up to her chest, her eyes searching mine. She looked breathtakingly vulnerable, yet there was a new strength in her gaze, the strength of a woman who knew she was loved. "I'm thinking about how to keep them from touching you," I said, walking back to the bed. I sat on the edge, my hand finding the curve of her hip through the linen. Yesterday was a victory, but it was a public one. The world saw me choose you over Julian Vane. They saw me threaten a rival CEO for a senior advisor. Today, the lines have to be drawn, Maya, very clearly. "Between what?" she asked, sitting up and letting the sheet fall slightly. "Between the woman I love and the senior advisor of Blackwood Industries. In this room, you are everything to me. But in that elevator and in that boardroom, we have to be a wall, no cracks, no visible emotions. If Henderson sees even a second of tenderness between us, he'll use it as a wedge to drive through the Horizon project." Maya reached out, her fingers tracing the scar on my upper lip. "You're asking me to go back to the mask. I'm asking you to wear it better than ever before, because now the stakes aren't just your father's house. The stakes are us." Maya POV. The mask felt heavier than the red suit ever could. We dressed in silence, a shared, domestic silence that felt like a sanctuary we were about to leave. Alexander wore a charcoal suit so dark it was almost black, his tie a deep blood red that seemed to mirror the fire in his eyes. I chose a structured, cream-colored dress with a high collar and a tailored belt. It was the color of a truce, but the silhouette was all business. When we stepped into the private elevator, I felt the shift. Alexander's posture straightened, his jaw tightening into that familiar, unreadable line. The man who had held me at 3:00 a.m., whispering promises against my skin, was gone, replaced by the titan who ruled Blackwood Tower. The doors opened on the 90th floor, and the air was already vibrating with tension. Marcus was waiting, his eyes wide as he looked at the 2 of us walking in together. He didn't say a word about the fact that we were 20 minutes late, or the fact that Alexander's hair was slightly less perfect than usual. He just handed over 2 thick folders. "The emergency board meeting is in 10 minutes, Marcus said, falling into step beside us. Henderson has the gala scandal video on a loop in the conference room. He's arguing that your personal involvement with the Sterling IP has compromised your fiduciary duty to the shareholders. Fiduciary duty, Alexander echoed, a cold, mocking smile touching his lips. Henderson wouldn't know duty if it bit him in the boardroom. He wants my chair, Marcus. He's been wanting it for years. He thinks he's found the string that will unravel me. He's also brought in a special consultant to review the Sterling algorithm, Marcus added, his voice dropping. I stopped in my tracks. A consultant? Who? He hasn't released the name yet, but he claims they have intimate knowledge of the original source code. My blood went cold. Caleb. Alexander turned to me, his eyes flaring with a dark, lethal heat. If he brought Thorne into my building again, I'm going to throw him out of the window myself. Alexander, don't, I said, grabbing his arm. I felt the eyes of the staff on us and immediately pulled my hand back, remembering Rule 1. That's exactly what Henderson wants. He wants you to lose your temper. He wants a scene. We draw the line here. We go in there and we handle this like the professionals we are. Alexander took a deep breath, his chest expanding as he centered himself. He looked at me, and for a fleeting second the mask slipped, showing me the man who would burn the world for me. Then it snapped back into place. You're right, he said. Marcus, tell the board we're coming, and tell the special consultant to be ready for an audit they won't survive. Alexander POV. The boardroom felt like a courtroom. The long mahogany table was lined with the men and women who held the keys to my empire. At the far end, Henderson sat like an inquisitor, a stack of tabloids spread out in front of him. But it was the man sitting in the corner, in the shadows, that made the hair on my neck stand up. It wasn't Caleb Thorne. It was a woman. She was older, perhaps in her 50s, wearing a sharp gray suit and spectacles that gave her the appearance of a schoolmarm. She looked at Maya with a mixture of pity and something that looked suspiciously like triumph. Mr. Blackwood, Henderson said, not standing as we entered. Thank you for joining us. I believe you've met Dr. Evelyn Sterling. I felt Maya gasp beside me. I reached out, my hand hovering near her back, offering support without touching her. Evelyn, Maya whispered, her voice trembling. Hello, Maya, the woman said, her voice like dry parchment. It's been a long time since your father's funeral. I see you've found a very lucrative way to spend your inheritance. Who is this? I demanded, my voice a low growl. My aunt, Maya said, her eyes fixed on the woman. My father's sister, and the woman who tried to sue him for the patents 10 years ago. Henderson leaned forward, a predatory gleam in his eyes. Dr. Sterling is a world-renowned neurologist. She claims that the mapping algorithm, the one you've based the Horizon project on, was actually a joint effort between her and your father. She claims Maya's advisor role is a sham designed to bypass her legal claim to the intellectual property. That's a lie. Maya stepped forward, her professional mask cracking under the weight of the betrayal. You left the lab in 2014, Evelyn. You took the grant money and moved to Zurich. You never touched the code after the recursive mapping phase. The paper trail says otherwise, dear, Evelyn said, tapping a folder in front of her. And more importantly, the board is concerned about the optics. A CEO sleeping with the woman who claims to own the company. It looks like a payoff, Alexander. It looks like you're using shareholder funds to secure a personal interest. The room went silent. The lines had been drawn, and Henderson had just crossed every single one of them. He wasn't just attacking the business, he was attacking the integrity of our relationship. I walked to the head of the table, my presence looming over Henderson. I didn't look at the files. I didn't look at the ant. I looked at every single board member, making eye contact until they looked away. "You want to talk about optics?" I said, my voice quiet and terrifyingly calm. "Let's talk about the optics of a board member hiring a disgraced relative to stage a coup against a project that has already received FDA fast-track approval. Let's talk about the optics of Julian Vane's stock dropping 10% this morning because he tried to play the same game Henderson is playing now." "This is different, Alexander," Henderson blustered. "Dr. Sterling has proof. Proof can be bought. Loyalty can't." I turned to Evelyn. "Dr. Sterling, you have 30 seconds to explain why I shouldn't have my legal team file a multi-billion-dollar defamation suit against you the moment you leave this room." "I have my own lawyers, Mr. Blackwood," she said, though she blinked. "I don't care about your lawyers. I care about the fact that you're a ghost. You're a footnote in your brother's legacy, and you're trying to rewrite history because you're bitter about a decade-old grudge." I looked back at the board. The Sterling IP belongs to Blackwood Industries. Maya Sterling is the senior advisor because she is the only person on this planet who knows how to make it work. If you want to fire her, you fire me. And if you fire me, the Horizon project dies today. A murmur of shock went around the table. "You would risk the entire company for her?" Henderson asked, his voice shaking. "I'm not risking the company for her," I said, leaning over the table until I was inches from his face. "I'm risking the company for the truth, and the truth is I run this room, not you, not Vane, and certainly not a bitter relative with a grudge." I looked at Maya. She was standing tall now, her eyes bright with tears she refused to shed. She looked at her aunt with a cold, hard clarity that made my heart swell with pride. "You can take the money Henderson offered you, Evelyn," Maya said, her voice steady, "but you will never take the code, because the code isn't just math. It was my father's heart, and he left it to me, not to you." Maya turned and walked toward the door. She didn't wait for me. She didn't look back. She drew the line herself. Maya POV. "I made it to the executive restroom before I broke. I leaned over the marble sink, my breath coming in jagged gasps. Evelyn. Of all the people Henderson could have found, he found the woman who had spent my childhood trying to tear my father down. The woman who had called him a dreamer and a fool, only to come back now and claim his genius as her own. I splashed cold water on my face, staring at my reflection. My professional mask was in pieces. I looked like the girl who had walked into the gala, terrified, cornered, and desperate. The door opened behind me. I didn't have to look to know it was Alexander. I could feel his heat, his presence, the way the room seemed to center itself around him. He didn't say anything. He just walked up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist, pulling me back against him. He buried his face in my neck, his breath warm against my skin. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For what? You didn't hire her." "I'm sorry you had to face that. I'm sorry that my world is so ugly that it dragged your family into the dirt." He turned me around in his arms, his hands cupping my face. His eyes were soft, filled with a tenderness that would have shocked the board members. "You were incredible in there, Maya. You stood your ground." "I lost my temper," I said, a tear finally escaping. "No, you found your voice." He wiped the tear away with his thumb. "The board is in a tailspin. Henderson is finished. I've already moved to have his seat vacated for cause. He used company resources to facilitate a fraudulent claim. He's done. And Evelyn. She's being escorted out as we speak." I've ensured she won't be able to get a job in this hemisphere by the time the markets close. I looked at him, seeing the ruthless power he wielded so effortlessly. He had protected me. He had stood by me in front of the people who could have taken everything from him. "You said you'd risk the company for me," I whispered. "I meant it." He kissed my forehead. "But I won't have to. The project is too big to fail now, and so are we." We stood there for a long time, the silence of the restroom a temporary shield against the chaos outside. But I knew the truce wouldn't last. The lines had been drawn, but the war was just entering a new phase. "What now?" I asked. "Now," Alexander said, his eyes darkening with a familiar, predatory focus. "We stop playing defense. Act I is over, Maya. The collision is finished. We've hit each other, we've hit the world, and we're still standing." And Act I. Act I is the fire. He took my hand, his grip firm and possessive. "We show them what happens when the two most dangerous people in this city actually start working together. No more secrets. No more masks in private. We're going to build this empire, and we're going to do it on our terms." Alexander POV. I led her out of the restroom and back toward the executive lobby. The staff were scurrying around, trying to look busy, but I could feel their eyes on us. They knew, the whole building knew. The lines were drawn. I walked her to her office, but instead of leaving, I followed her inside and shut the door. I pulled her to me, my mouth finding hers in a kiss that was desperate, fierce, and filled with 1,000 promises I hadn't yet put into words. "Alexander, someone will see," she gasped against my lips. "Let them," I growled. "I'm tired of hiding the only thing I'm proud of." I pulled back, looking into her hazel eyes. "I'm taking you away this weekend. A business trip officially. But we're going to the house in the Hamptons, just us. No Marcus, no phones, no Henderson." "We can't just leave," she protested. "Watch me." I kissed her one last time, a lingering, sensory promise of what was to come. Act I starts on Monday, but this weekend belongs to the man who loves you. I walked out of her office, my heart feeling lighter than it had in years. I had drawn the lines. I had protected my own. As I reached the elevator, I saw Marcus standing there looking nervous. "Sir, Julian Vane is on line 1, he sounds frantic." "Tell him I'm busy," I said, stepping into the lift. "Tell him Alexander Blackwood is unavailable for the foreseeable future." "And the reason, sir." I looked at the closing doors, my reflection in the gold leaf glass showing a man who finally had everything. "Tell him I'm attending to a private acquisition," I said. "The only one that matters." Maya POV, end of ACTI. I sat at my desk, looking out at the skyline. The red suit was discarded, the cream dress was wrinkled, and my heart was wide open. I had walked into this building as a mistake to be buried. I was leaving today as the woman who owned the man who owned the room. The lines were drawn. The battle was set. I looked at the photo of my father on my desk. "We did it, Dad," I thought. "We're safe." But as the sun began to set over Manhattan, casting a long, fiery glow across the glass towers, I knew that safety was an illusion. The fire was coming. Act I was waiting. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the heat. I was the one holding the match. Next chapter, Chapter 16, He Wants What He Can't Have.